Room 442 is brought to you by North Star Bets. That's a win.
And it's been a very difficult week for Toronto FC, losing back-to-back games to CF Montreal, of course, their biggest rivals. I'm Sarah Pararia, joined alongside Mikey Singh. Mikey, obviously they got knocked out in the Canadian Championship midweek last week to Montreal, and then they head over to Montreal and lose 2-0 in a league game. It's been a really bad week for Montreal. I mean, it's been a great week for Montreal, actually. It's been a really bad week for TFC. But we were at training on Thursday, and you were saying how important it was for Toronto to get a win here, and they didn't.
Yeah, I was also saying how difficult it would be
for
Toronto to get a win here. You're missing 10 players, 5 starters, 2 key pieces off the bench. We're talking about a team that we already know was thin in depth, and you're going to go ask them to go out and get a win, and that's such a tall task. But that being said, they didn't get the win, right? They had a pretty decent first half, all things considered. You know, considering the situation and everything that was going on in terms of missing players, they were still very much in that game in that first half, and then a couple bad bounces go their way as well. Like, it seems like right now nothing can go right for this club. In the 6th minute, they should have been up a man. Montreal should have got a red card for sending off. It was pretty clear, but referee deemed that it was too far away from goal for it to be considered last man back. I don't know. Then Jaquil Marcheretti, which we'll get a little bit more into, but he gets a red card on a play that, most players probably don't get a red card in, but that's just the bounces that TFC are getting right now. And, if you want to look at this game in particular, just zeroing on this game in particular, I think you can chalk a lot of it up to, a lot of it is bad luck when you look at the injuries and you look at some of the calls that just didn't go their way. But trend-wise, big picture, it's another loss for a team that's in a really bad place right now.
Yeah. Okay, let's talk a little bit about Jaquil Marcheretti, because he got sent off in the 56th. Obviously, TFC already down. Now they're down a man. Do you think he was deserving of that red card?
No, I don't think it was a red card. Obviously, Hernan Lozada, the way that he, in a way, got to the referee, running after Jaquil Marcheretti outside of his technical area. Jaquil Marcheretti just threw the ball over Hernan Lozada's head.
But that is time wasting. Like that any player would get a yellow card for that, in my opinion.
I don't agree. Not a second yellow, at least. And his first yellow, too, was even fairly soft. And like I said, Hernan Lozada left his technical area to go run and get the ball. That's not a player doing that. That's a coach trying to go and get himself involved in the play. I didn't think that was necessarily the right call at that point of the game. It's a derby match. I think the ref could be a little bit more lenient there. I don't think it was the worst instance of time wasting. We even saw it during the course of that match. So, I'm not sure. I think that's a bad break for TFC. Obviously, I think for Marcheretti, it's a learning point, right? You're on a yellow card already. Don't put yourself in the situation where the referee can even make a decision like that. And, I understand it's heat of the moment. The play is going on. You're trying to, help your team out in the best way possible. But, if you give the referee the chance to make a decision like that, sometimes a bounce doesn't go your way. And I think that's what happened to Marcheretti.
Well, I think, like you mentioned, it was such a heated affair. It is a derby. So I think it comes to a point, especially in the second half, we usually notice it. The ref kind of has to put their foot down because sometimes it can get out of hand. We saw, a heated match midweek against these two sides. And again, it was the same thing. It's natural. It's normal. It's going to be like that. So I'm wondering if the ref was maybe just being a little bit more precautious than you would naturally be.
Well, it's the ref's decision that led to the whole blow up after the match as well. Right? That was, whether you agree or don't agree that it was a red card, it was a controversial decision that he put himself in the forefront of.
Yeah.
And TFC players weren't happy about the decision after the match. Richard Lehrer obviously going and making his feelings felt about, the way that Hernan Lozada got involved in the play when he feels like he shouldn't have had to do that. And that's what led to the two sides coming together afterwards. That's what led to Jaquil Marcheretti coming back out on the pitch. So I'm interested to see actually what MLS does about that, because that in its own is, I'm not sure what exactly the consequence would be for that, but not a smart decision. That this time right now at this point of the season where mentioned how many players TFC are missing right now. You can't afford to be missing too many more for much longer. So, yeah that one, again, another learning point for a young kid.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, maybe TFC shouldn't have put themselves in this position in the first place. If we could take a look at the standings right now, TFC are last in the Eastern Conference. Obviously, we can see the difference from 9th place DC United, which is the last qualifying spot for playoffs. Obviously, it's only a matter of 3 points, but 12 matches played, Mikey, 12 points from that. It's not good enough. I mean, it's like when we look back at the game against Montreal, they only had 2 shots on net and none on target. So we can talk about, maybe the ref was, and he was, maybe a little aggressive and making some quick calls there, but TFC weren't doing enough in the first place to ever win this game, in my opinion. You had no shots on target in the game. The stats are there.
Yeah, sure, but I agree, like, they got to do better in the final third, but the first 45 minutes, there was 3, 4, 5 instances where TFC had advantages moving towards Montreal's goal, that if they make that final pass, if they make that, right decision, then they're in on goal and it's a clear chance. So
but you said if. That's the thing. It's like
they got to be better in front of the final third, for sure. Absolutely. But the fact that you're missing 10 players, and we're talking about that in that match, and then the second half, I mean, you're down a man. How many shots are you going to be created? But it does speak to a bigger issue with this team. When you look at the talent that they have in terms of Bernardeschi and Insigne, you have to be finding a way to create more chances.
Yeah.
And, some of that, sure, falls on the coach. Bob Bradley needs to figure out how to get more out of his team moving forward, attacking-wise. Also, you got to look at some of the players, too, like the Insignes and the Bernardeschi's. You guys have to do more to create more chances for this team moving forward. So, it's not a good time right now at the football club whatsoever.
It's really not. And let's see, what Bob Bradley had to say after this match.
It doesn't yet feel good because without the results, it's easy to just be looking at the negative side of things. But I want them to still see that there's things that they're doing that are positive, and if we can improve in some other ways, get some guys healthy, that's where we can still turn things around and find a good way to finish.
I appreciate Bob Bradley trying to find some light here, because it's obviously, as we just mentioned, a very dark time for TFC. But we've spoken about him as a coach now and maybe how he's fitting with the club over the last couple of weeks. Is this the right approach, though, to try and be like, well, we're not there yet, but there's still instances, like you mentioned, that are good football. When you're last, you're knocked out of the Canadian Championship. Obviously, you have so many injuries. Is it time for a bit of some tough love right now? I'm just playing devil's advocate. I'm also not a coach. I'm not an expert here, but clearly something isn't working. When do we see some sort of shift?
Well, what if he comes out and he buries his team in front of the media? Which, I mean, I guarantee you the conversations that are happening within the walls of that locker room are a lot different than the conversation that Bob Bradley comes out and says that to media. The club's already going through the really dark time right now. Is that really going to spark the club? I mean, I think the reality of the situation is, as much as people want to change, a new coach hypothetically coming into this situation currently, as is, missing 10 players with the way that this roster is constructed, no team in Major League Soccer is going to be able to compete with that. So if he comes out, he buries his team, the next thing you have to do is respond on Wednesday, still with a team shorthanded. You're not setting that team up for success at that point. Yeah. Right? So I appreciate, maybe wanted to take a different approach, and maybe within the walls of that dressing room, they are taking a different approach. And heck, they had to take a different approach against Montreal. We saw Marc-Anthony Kaye play center back. We saw Richie Larea slide into a back three. We saw Bob Bradley try and use wing backs. So they tried to take a different approach football-wise to that game. Mentally, they're going through it right now. I don't think their coach coming out and burying them in front of the media, adding more fuel to this, let's face it, gigantic fire that's Toronto FC right now, is going to be doing them any favors. But, when I see, what is the answer for Bob Bradley and the Reds? Bob Bradley has to figure out a way to get more out of Lorenzo Insigne. MLSE invested, TFC, MLSE, Bill Manning, whoever you want to say, invested the majority of their budget into signing Lorenzo Insigne. He hasn't been the player that Toronto FC thought they were getting
Absolutely
at this
not.
point, right? He hasn't been a player who creates chances on his own. He has been a player that can beat 1, 2, 3 guys and score a goal on his own so far this year. Is he skilled? Yeah. He's the most skilled player that Toronto FC have ever had by far. But that doesn't always equate into being a really good MLS designated player.
For sure.
So if you're not getting the most out of Lorenzo Insigne, and I don't know if there's a coach out there in MLS that would be able to get the most out of Lorenzo Insigne, then questions are going to be asked about, Bob Bradley's future, because MLSC, they made their bet here. Lorenzo Insigne, TFC are going to live and die by Lorenzo Insigne. So if Bob Bradley's not getting the best out of Insigne, they're going to sure as hell try for someone else to get the best out of Lorenzo Insigne. So that's the main priority for when I'm looking at this team.
All right. Well, pressure is on Lorenzo because TFC are taking on the New York Red Bull at BMO Field on Wednesday. They are tied for points at the bottom of the table, and TFC seriously need a win. So let's see what the Reds can come up with.
Room 442 is brought to you by North Star Bets. That's a win.